Grace and peace, my friends. This week I thought I would immerse myself in the imagery of Jeremiah 18. So I thought, I'll just buy a pottery wheel and try to make something. And yeah, this is incredibly hard. I watched a couple YouTube videos and I was like, oh yeah, I got it. But for those of you who are actual real artists, please don't roll your eyes at me that much. I'm clearly a beginner at this. But to understand the imagery in Jeremiah 18 with the potter and the clay, I think it's important to know Jeremiah first, because Jeremiah was born at the worst time in Israel's history. When he's born toward the end of his life, they're on the cusp of being exiled, kind of kicked out of Jerusalem, conquered by the Babylonians, and when they are, they can't come back for many years. And then not only that, but he gives them like the worst message to preach. God says, you're going to be a prophet, and you're going to have to go, and you're going to have to preach this kind of dour sort of message about sin, and it's too late, and wrath of God is coming. And needless to say, he didn't make a lot of friends. And so the people hated him. It's a hard job to have when everyone dislikes you. Jeremiah, he was sort of a product of his circumstances. I can relate to that. As a pastor in a mainline denomination, in an age where church attendance is declining because everyone is becoming spiritual but not religious, it can be very discouraging. Me and my colleagues at times, we find hope in one another. We find encouragement. I often think of Jeremiah, called to a tough time to preach a tough message. I find hope in that because God never left his side. There's this imagery, of course, in Jeremiah 18. God leads Jeremiah from the lowest point of his life to see God sitting at something like a pottery wheel, crafting something beautiful. At that moment in Jeremiah's life, when he saw that vision, he was literally in a pit. The people they hated him so much they asked to throw him in a pit, and in a pit he went. And as he was down there, he began to kind of sink into the mud, and it was really the lowest point of his life. And then God brings him in to the pottery house, almost a pottery barn, but the pottery house. And God says, you see this piece of clay here? In these hands, my hands, this piece of clay is nothing. But in God's hands, God says, this clay can be something beautiful. I'm going to refashion this. That gave Jeremiah hope for himself. It gave Jeremiah hope for Israel. We have an artist in our church who makes pottery. She was selling it. She had gone to Rwanda to visit our orphans there, and Miranda's her name. She sells pottery, and she sold it to raise money for these orphans. And I bought a coffee mug. It's a really beautiful mug. And when I finally cut my intake of caffeine, I was like, yes, I can use Miranda's mug now. When I drink out of it, I think about what a work of art this is. I think about God being the craftsperson that he is, that is able to sort of make this beautiful thing. It gives me hope. Warren Buffett, he's the great investor, and he sends a letter to all of his investors every year. And it gets national attention because he's such a brilliant mind. One year he wrote a letter, and it said three things. It was basically three tips. It said, buy when everyone's selling, sell when everyone's buying, and value. But I like that first one. Buy when everyone's selling. It makes you wonder why everyone's not a billionaire, right? It's so simple. But for God, it actually is that simple. For God, he buys when everyone else is selling on us. In the lowest point of our life, when people are gossiping about us, when there's ugly emails about you, when people are saying mean things behind your back, when you're giving up on yourself, God is buying in. God is saying, I'm all in on you. I'm all in on restoring you. And I'm going to take this piece of clay here, God says, and you think it's destroyed, you think it's collapsed. But in my hands, it can be something beautiful. And so when I think about particular institutions or people or moments in my life or even churches or anywhere that's having a low moment when everyone's selling on them, I think, you know what? That's exactly when God buys. God is investing when no one else is. We're kind of in a low point right now for our country, and I know a lot of people may be selling them the idea of peace, of reconciliation, but it's in these moments like this where God takes those hands, the master craftsperson takes that piece of clay and is able to mold something truly, truly beautiful. God is buying into us right now. God is buying in to all those who are crying out to the Lord, asking for help. Thanks be to God. Amen.